There we go. Welcome to the Dungeon Crawlers podcast, casting light on the depths of online multiplayer gaming. This is the MMORPG news and discussion podcast by the Dungeon Crawler Network. I am the founder and host of this podcast, Aggelos, and with me this evening, Isarii, internet wordsmith over at MMOgames.com, MMORPG.com, Gamespace.com, and Tamriel Foundry, who also dabbles in Twitch and YouTube. Everything at one place over at AaronPenman.com. I'm so glad you did not add to that this week. You're kind of muted there, sorry. I mean, glad you...
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was going to say... Yeah, not yet, but we are working on it. With our super secret plans. It's going to be the worst. I'll find a way to condense it, maybe. Yeah.
We have to do something, because otherwise it's just going to be a podcast about where you do stuff. That's it.
His Excellency, the High Lord of the Seven Realms, Defender of the Kingdom. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Our normal co-hosts, Brodin and Taruha, are MIA this week, but have been replaced by the adoring fans that you see below me. The one with the lipstick and the rouge, I guess, is Taruha. That represents Taruha, and the beard is Brodin. I don't know. I kind of like them. They're pretty nice. I think they might stay permanent on the show.
I am way too proud of myself for my last minute paint hatchet job that just happened there. Way too proud.
Way too proud. We also have a special guest. All right, this is awesome because we're talking all about Crowfall tonight with their massive update reveal, and we brought Scree over. So Scree, welcome.
Thank you.
Do you want to tell our listeners a little bit about what you do and where you're from and why you like Crowfall?
Sure. I've been an MMO gamer since '96, playing Neverwinter Nights on AOL, and I just absolutely love PvP MMOs. And Crowfall obviously came around, and it's been an interesting trip so far. But one could say I have entered into the realm of obsession. I run Stealth magazine, which is a Crowfall theory crafting blog. I run Obsidian, which is a stealth-based Crowfall guild. Mm-hmm. I have a podcast, however, we've only done a single episode, and then we ran into some timing conflicts, so... called Game of Crows, so we'll be starting that back up later this month. And I help out on the subreddit for Crowfall too, so I'm kind of all over the place when it comes to Crowfall.
And you were right about the addiction, so
yeah,
that is a thing.
Yeah, and the game's not even out yet.
It's okay because we're all massive gamers here. That's what we do. That's why we run shows. I mean, Dungeon Crawler. This is our MMO gaming show, but we have 4 other game-specific podcasts. So, yeah, we're obsessive. We are very obsessive.
It's a serious problem.
It is.
Good company, then.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually really funny. If I were to write out as many podcasts that I produce as Isarii does his writing, I would have I'd have something like what he does, and it's very sad. So, hello, chat room. We see quite a few people out there in the chat room, and people who apparently know Scree. So you are popular tonight. So there you go.
Yeah.
All right.
I have my haters.
Your haters. Okay, so that's why we get so many downvotes lately. All right, we are talking the massive reveal that Crowfall dropped I guess it was only yesterday, because we actually had a few little bits of news for the general MMO show, but it was nothing really special. And
what a week to slack on the notes, right?
Yeah, that too.
It worked out.
It did. It really did. I mean, Crowfall kind of swooped in there like a crow and saved us from our terrible note-taking. And when we saw everything that they had done with this massive reveal, I talked to Isarii. I'm like, we just got to do another individual show. We can't just make this a footnote in our notes. We actually have to make this a show. So, of course, we invited Scree, who this is his addiction. So he is our expert for this show. So J. Todd Coleman, if you don't know who he is the director, creative director over at Artcraft Studios and co-founder. He also, he's been in the MMO genre forever. He did a game called Shadowbane. That was probably one of the games that I remember him most for. And we'll probably talk about that a little bit later because some of the things in the reveal just scream Shadowbane to me. But in this massive reveal, they touched on a couple things that they're pretty much just revamping all about Crowfall. So we did a Crowfall show. Was it episode 4? Sorry, was it Crowfall? I think it was episode 4.
That sounds right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's say yes.
Yep. So yeah, we did a Crowfall episode there, and we talked about everything that was essentially what Crowfall was for everyone that who was new to the game. But now it feels like we need to do another one because they're pretty much just scrapping 90% of their game and are just completely revamping, like doing away with the archetype system and now adding race and class combos. Adding into the disciplines, which wasn't really new. It's just something new for the playtest because this is something I think they had planned for a while.
Yeah.
And they did a massive overhaul of the lighting and graphics, which it looks fantastic. So we're just going to go ahead and jump right on into this. Scree, since you are our resident Crowfall expert, can you give us like a little bit of like a reaction to this massive reveal when you saw it?
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of the player base, not myself included, unfortunately, they kind of saw this coming. They'd been kind of delaying the the releases of some of the archetypes, and considering their release window, where they were talking about releasing this summer, we knew something was up, and this definitely was kind of a surprise for some people. They spent the last 6 days prior to that showing off images and like teaser content to try and give people a hint of what was coming. And there were quite a few people who caught on quickly that this was a race class unlock. Mm-hmm. So a lot of happy people, though. I haven't seen anyone who was upset or disappointed or even remotely bored by this release.
Don't underestimate the internet.
I'm sure there's somebody somewhere who's pissed off.
You just go to Reddit. There are unhappy people there all the time.
There's two ways I judge the general mood of reveals like this. One is the Reddit population, which you're right, usually trolls everything into the dirt. Almost always the posts for this release were positive. So I saw a lot of people in the past when they were told that archetypes were locked to race and class that they weren't going to buy the game. That was the deciding factor for them, the fact that they couldn't customize their character. So they knew this was going to lure some of those people back in. And I'm telling you, the moment they posted it, I saw at least 3 posts on Reddit who said, I'm buying this game now. That was the deciding factor for them. The other measure of crowd enthusiasm is Massively. Massively has seemed to hate on this game in the comments. Every time Crowfall news comes out, they either get no comments or negative comments. This one, almost all positive. And all from people who, typically wouldn't have even bothered looking at Crowfall because they've already written it off just based on some of the design decisions they made. So I think this is a incredibly well-received news release. And that's just the race class unlock part. I don't even think people have really had a chance to dive into what the ramifications of the other 2 parts of the release were. So
I can
pretty
tell
happy with it myself.
No, I mean, Isarii pretty much sent it to me, and I looked at it. I had a jaw drop moment going, oh, wow. Because, and a rather unpopular opinion, sorry, me and him will argue over this, but I kind of always felt that the way that they designed archetypes, and he goes into, J. Todd Coleman goes into why they decided to go archetypes. It was mostly, budgetary reasons. It was just easier.
Yep.
But through their crowdfunding and everything like that, they've been able to change it. So now these archetypes are gone, and we'll go into that. But I kind of felt like with archetypes, it really did feel MOBA-ish. And sorry,
wrong.
Yeah, see, he's going
wrong.
It did. It did to me.
You're not that wrong.
No, I get that it doesn't play that way.
I have probably made the comparison at some point before that particular bit feels MOBA-esque, so I can't really criticize you there.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people had been saying previously that this is what we were talking about earlier, that sort of the broader MMO base, especially on like the MMORPG subreddit, they had said the whole game is a MOBA, and they were speaking more to like the impersistence of the world effectively, I think, than the archetypes themselves. So they factored in a little bit. So I think that's an area where I wasn't too big.
Whenever they reference MOBAs,
criticism.
Yeah, and exactly. When they reference MOBAs, that was one part. The other was the fact that impersistence of the worlds, but they always glazed over the fact that campaigns could last anywhere from 90 days to they could make them last indefinitely. They could make them last permanently. It's just the whole MOBA comparison is one of those things that kind of triggers me a little, unfortunately.
And I see some people in chat doing the same thing, and I'm literally saying I know Archetype does not.
Let me defend you on that one, because it's being dismissed out of hand in a way that I think doesn't really. One of the key features of a MOBA as opposed to an MMO that makes them way more competitive for PvP is that they give you a big, they really limit your options and customization, and they just hand you a pre-made toolkit. And they hand you lots of toolkits, more than you'd usually get in an MMO. And that is very similar to what a high-level glance of archetypes gives you. It's, you have this character that sort of, it just comes, and they just give you these, preset abilities into it. There's not a lot of customization. You can't have, different racials with different classes. So I think that's, to dismiss that out of hand and be incredibly dismissive of that criticism, although I don't personally agree with it, is, I think, being silly. Right. I think it deserves more thought than people are necessarily giving it, because that is one of the big things that makes a MOBA different than an MMO. And sure, by the way, yeah, people are saying, Crowfall had a lot of customization. No, it didn't. Crowfall is going to have a lot of customization, and the discipline system that they just unveiled today or yesterday that we're going to talk about is a lot of that. But for people, again, who I said who are looking at Crowfall from a very high level, who are not fans of the game, who are the people that are lobbying this type of criticism, it's really easy to look at this and see the way that they're, just making the systems that are in-game, the systems that are really, really easy to look at without digging into the game further, and to come away with that impression.
Yeah,
and that's absolutely, I think, the problem with Crowfall and their way of developing this game is they've been developing it, basically since inception, in the public's eye, when most games would not even show this to their closest friends in some of the stages it's been in, because of that ability to misconceive notions about the game. So it's nice to finally see those people come back on board now that they know what Crowfall's about, and I think the customization aspect of this game and how much effort they've put into allowing you to distinguish yourself from other players is unheard of in the MMO world. And I mean, we could talk about the customization aspect indefinitely in this game. It's just mind-blowing what they've done and will do.
Yeah, and I seen in chat someone's like, lack of knowledge on a consumer's part does not justify an argument. No, it doesn't, but it's enough to condemn a game.
Yeah, that's what I just said basically. That's not a realistic way to expect people to evaluate a product, because no one is an expert when they're making a first impression.
And I'm sure anyone here who follows,
I'm not, like I said, I'm not saying I found Crowfall ever personally to be MOBA-esque. But I can definitely see the similarities that somebody making a snap judgment very quickly when they look down the website's list of features could come up with that.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that archetypes themselves were MOBA-esque, actually. Not in a big picture like the game itself played like a MOBA, but the concept of archetypes within it was.
Yeah. If you wanted to play an assassin, you were a Fae. I mean, that's essentially logging into League of Legends going, I want to play like this, that archer character. Well, it's only that archer. I can't make a different archer. It's just that one. And yeah, like you said, it's, here's the thing. I'm sure this is, anyone who's following Crowfall, I'm sure this is not the first time. We are not revealing some amazing revelation to you that the Dungeon Crawler Network called Crowfall MOBA-esque. This is not the first time you've heard this criticism. So...
Probably not the last.
Probably not the last
either.
either.
First time you've heard it from me.
Right.
Yeah. I'm just saying first impressions.
Yeah.
Is MOBA-esque. I don't think the game is MOBA-esque.
No, but first impressions are something that will turn an audience away.
I just didn't want it to be dismissed out of hand, because I can see where it comes from.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad they actually came up with the money to pull this off, because this was really a money call. Archetypes were done specifically because of the cost of animating all the various races and classes and combinations together was just impossible for a small company like this. They're making a game for 12 million. I mean, you name the games out there. Supposedly, this Ashes of whatever it is had 30 million in seed funding to get started, and this Kickstarter is just juice on top. Mm-hmm. And Crowfall's making a game from the beginning for less than half of that amount. So it's worth mentioning that the reason for that archetype was purely a monetary reason. They wanted to be fiscally responsible when they're developing the game and give players a lot of choices. So 13 different classes. Oh, now it's like 11, but it has played out for them well because they were able to get the momentum and the money to actually make this unlock happen, which is very well received, and hopefully will get rid of people calling this a MOBA.
Right. Well, I can tell you when I saw this, it does in my mind go, okay, now with race and class combos, just from a super high level, not looking at the game any deeper, it screams MMO to me. It screams RPG at this point because I can now pick a class as long as it fits within the class combo. Like, okay, I want to play a human. Well, what can a human play? Okay, my choice is under human. I can play knight, templar, ranger, or cleric. I can build a class from that. Or if I want to, you pick one or the other or both, and you can now make a decision. You're no longer locked to, like they said earlier, the Fey assassin, and you were a Fey assassin, period, regardless of anything else. I think there's only one class that is specifically race locked, and that's I think the duelist, which we'll share later, because that's still tied to the Ganetian. But everything else generally has somewhere between. It looks like everything has at least 3, with some of the other ones having 4 or 5. I think 4 is the highest. So 3 or 4 for every other race combo, are 3 or 4. Yeah, that's what it looks like. And most classes have somewhere between 3. Almost everything has 3 minimum, with the exception of the duelist, which we'll share out that chart here. Actually, I'm going to do that right now in the chat. What I'm doing in the chat is I'm going to share you the class and race combo list, showing you what actually you can be. So with this, they did away with archetypes, and now they're adding in different races: human, half-elf, Netheri. I don't know what that is.
Like a human.
Is it?
Yeah,
but like with a magic name.
Theory. Yeah. Okay.
I think they're like the dark-skinned human offshoot.
Okay. All right. I got you. So yeah, now they're offering 12 different races versus what they had before, which a lot of them were already there. Well, actually, I guess the theory, it was essentially the Confessor, wasn't it? Because I'm looking at the model right now that they used in the image or in the video, and it looked like the Confessor model, at least the male Confessor. So yeah, they have the human, half-elf, Netheri, Fey, wood elf, high elf, stoneborn, half-giant, Elkin, Minotaur, Centaur, and Ganetian. And of course now the 11 classes as well as Knight, Confessor, Templar, Ranger, Assassin, Bard, Frostweaver, which that one was that tied to like the Moon Elf or something like that before? It was the only thing you could play. Champion, Myrmidon, Cleric, and Duelist. So that list now shows you the different combinations. So they were saying that the term archetype is no longer relevant, is no longer a thing. I mean, we talked about this one already. Archetype was a way for them to make the game that they wanted within the budget that they were setting for themselves. Because animating is not a cheap thing to do. Modeling is not a cheap thing to do. So, there we go. Now, race and class combos. Have you seen any feedback from the community? Because I hear there's, they sent us that list of showing the different race and class combos, and there's the question that they posed of, I want to play X class, that is Y, can I do it? And maybe not. Has there been a lot of feedback in the community about the way that they broke this down?
Not that I've paid a lot of attention to. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons that I haven't really paid attention to it is most people like to min-max, especially in a competitive PvP game. And what we're seeing, at least at a subtle level, if you look on their website and you go to their races page, each race has certain stats, ability scores that are tied to it. And so if you start going too wacky with some of the races, you're really kind of gimping yourself because the major power curve comes from the ability scores.
Mm-hmm.
So even if they did open it up, the chances that a lot of people are going to take advantage of it are probably minimal. And so, they might be asking for it, but ultimately, once they start actually looking at the stats and understanding how vessel creation works and how that happens to impact your ability to play the game well, the chances are that they're not going to even bother with it at that point. So I haven't paid close attention to it because I don't really see any reason why you would want to make a Minotaur Druid if Minotaurs are the worst with Spirit. It just doesn't make any sense.
Stop points.
Yeah. And again, I cite that purely from a competitive PvP standpoint, not from a lore or, I want my character to look like this standpoint, because I don't really care about those arguments. So,
and I think a lot of the people who were into this game at the beginning, I don't want to say that, make a generalization, but it kind of, a lot of the people who didn't mind the archetype system was because they didn't really care like what it is. I don't care if I'm this. I just want to be this archetype for whatever my PvP side. This is more appealing to, like I said, the RPG player of the MMO genre. Now, one thing I kind of noticed, and it actually made me think about this because they made note of this, that the races, powers drive from class as well as disciplines and runestones and things like that we'll talk about in a little bit. But races will have their own stuff. Certain races had specific abilities. Like they cited that Ganetians could burrow. They've done that since the beginning. Centaurs run faster, and Fae had access to, reliance on their wings. Has this made a call out for some of the other ones, like the Ethereal Human and the half-elf, the different elves, to add some sort of special ability? Like,
I think that's what's coming tomorrow. They're doing a live stream from, I think, 11. Oh, God, Pan's gonna kill me because I'm supposed to know this stuff off the top of my head when I'm making appearances, right?
Yeah,
I'm working for her.
Get your shit together.
Do your job.
There's a live stream tomorrow, and I think I have it sticky down the Reddit. But basically, they're taking Q&A from the community, and I think that's going to be a big question: is what are the benefits? Because we haven't seen any of those. But I think the honest fact is it's not implemented in the game yet.
Yeah.
The snap test that was going on just while we were waiting to queue this up, the vessel system is really just kind of in its rough stages right now.
It's 11 Central tomorrow, by the way, whatever time that is in a real time zone.
That's Crowfall Central Time, just so you know.
Crowfall Central Time?
But where actual
Standard Time.
people live, it's in some other time.
Chicago, come on. Get out of here. Anyways, I think you're going to see those bonuses roll out. Because the real question I have is, are Ganetians going to be able to burrow? And do you really want a stealth knight and a stealth cleric running around on the battlefields? I say yes, but I'm a little biased.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's going to extend to them, and to what extent those powers will be. I would imagine they're probably going to be pretty gimpy, and most people won't slot them just because there's so many more powerful options out there. But who knows?
Yeah, because I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, originally when some of these things were in there is because this game was with the archetypes and everything being locked down. It wasn't so much that you didn't think about it as like a race class combo. It's just like the duelist, it can burrow, because it was a Ganetian. That's the only thing it could do. A Legionnaire was a Centaur. It was, right? Like, that's how you dealt with the Centaur's naturally faster speed because that's what the Legionnaire was. That was what it encompassed. But now that, I guess the Legionnaire had a name change. I guess it's a cleric now, right?
It's cleric now. Yeah.
Yeah. But the idea was when you were fighting what was the Legionnaire, you were taking the Legionnaire skill set, the kit, as well as the speed as one collective thing. But now you no longer can factor in Centaur as a 100% option, And if you look at that, like I said, the thing I posted earlier, the race and class combo, humans can be, Stoneborn can be, half giants, centaurs, and Ganetians can all be the what was the Legionnaire and is now known as cleric. So now you're factoring in, if you're a Ganetian cleric, they burrow. So I don't know. I feel like
they need to. I think they're going to distinguish these a little bit better and diverge the race and archetype powers into the race class split off. And I think they've kind of bought themselves some time because they eliminated the Forge Master and the Stalker from their lineup. They were just too similar. The Stalker was too similar to the Ranger. And so you can still be an Elkin, which is cool because I liked the theme for that race. But the Stalker itself is gone. So they're saying that you'll eventually be able to build out a kit that was similar to the Stalker, with the discipline system. So they've kind of saved themselves some time in having to do a lot of the development around those base archetype skills, and they can kind of probably focus that on the race class split of what those power sets were originally in the archetype design. So,
right. Yeah, I saw they were merging some different things together. And now they are also saying that, crafting skills are now mainline skill trees. So Forge Master was completely removed, and then the Stoneborn or the Dwarves were now just given a new class options fitting their, the lore, the culture. Which kind of made me sad because I really like the Forge Master just because it felt iconic. But I know they said that it may make an appearance later as a discipline, so that's pretty neat.
Yeah, it really didn't make sense to have a whole class or archetype dedicated to crafting. It really makes more sense to split that off into disciplines and break it up amongst all the players, because you don't want people min-maxing and having to make a Forge Master just to be competitive in crafting. That's not really good design. So
I would strenuously argue against that. I actually have really enjoyed games where you have to play as a dedicated crafter.
Well, you still have to play as a dedicated crafter in Crowfall from the skill.
No, I mean you have no combat capability.
Gotcha.
And it didn't allow alts on the servers.
Gotcha.
Is that a Star Wars Galaxy reference?
Hell yeah, it is. Yeah, and I mean you absolutely have to have a super robust crafting system in your game with an economy that's running absolutely flawlessly. And Crowfall actually kind of sounds like it does. It's the closest I've seen to Star Wars Galaxy's system. So I think they could have pulled that off if they really wanted to. I can see why they didn't. I think these days, I think with the types of players that are into Crowfall right now, it would have been a harder sell to say, yep, you're going to play a crafter and you're not going to fight. But when you have the community that supports that, and you market the game in a way and sort of design all your systems into this holistic vision of a world, I think that can be a great gameplay system.
Right.
I think,
but I wouldn't play one.
I just want to say it still exists because
we talked about this game. We did talk about this on the last show. You definitely, by the way, I understand like the level of investment that you have to put into developing your skill trees to be effective at crafting. Yeah. You're either going to be giving up huge amounts of power, at least for what would you say, like the first year of progression?
Maybe more.
Maybe more, yeah, to be able to do that versus, where every minute of you're devoting to that, you're giving up from combat. So I'm definitely not unhappy with the direction they're taking it. I just wouldn't say it's necessarily bad design to have people that can't fight and are completely reliant on other people to do the combat for them when it comes to, going out and gathering or something like that.
And just to that point, I think the measure of if a game is successful in creating a role where you have to dedicate your whole self to it is, does the game encourage you to buy an alt to be able to get more capabilities? And in this case, it seemingly does. You can't be a crafter in combat. You have to basically buy an alt if you want to do both at launch. So I think that's the measure of success here for them replicating that Star Wars Galaxies.
Well, Star Wars Galaxies and Crowfall, as I understand it, won't allow you to have an alt. I mean, you would have to buy a new account. That's what you're saying. Yeah, I actually misunderstood it for a second. Yeah. Yes. Never mind. I just agree completely with what you're saying.
Oh, that's right. When you put a character within a game world, it's locked and no other characters can be added, correct? Is that what you're referring to? To that specific, because you can have multiple characters training up and whatnot, but they're locked to a specific campaign world, and you can't send multiple in, right? Am I wrong?
There's no characters anymore.
Right. Okay.
So you have one account, and you can be in multiple campaigns, but you can only be in one at a time.
Okay.
So, like, let's say you're in your friend's server. He goes to bed. You don't have any friends left in this campaign, which is they're pseudonyms for servers. We'll assume people understand that distinction, but
Yeah.
So you could log out and switch to a different campaign, but you're locked to those servers until their completion. So
Okay.
there's a limit to how many concurrent campaigns you can be in simultaneously. They haven't really touched on this detail in a long time, so it may or may not be true anymore. But I think they said the number.
There's probably
3.
going to be some prohibitive way to transfer.
Yeah.
I would imagine. Although I'd be fine if they didn't.
Yeah, even if they locked it to a single one, that'd be fine to me too. I don't mind.
Yeah, same.
So, and I have this question, and some of our people in the chat who follow Crowfall exactly will probably think I'm stupid for this because it's a very layman question. But for people who are part of the DCN community who maybe don't know, and this includes me, how is this going to affect some of the Kickstarter rewards? Now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, offering
a lot of that stuff is focused on the, not to cut you off, but
no,
focused on, like plots of land and stuff like that. That's really for the Eternal Kingdoms, which
right, and
are outside of the campaign.
What about the
situation.
subscription rewards with the being able to train multiple, at that time archetypes?
Yeah, as I understand it, that's being applied to, if they're even keeping that, the subscription benefits are going to be applied to like how many skill lines you can train simultaneously, but there are different types of skill lines, and it won't be like, it'll be like you can train 3 different combat classes skill lines, not like you can train a combat class and 2 craftings.
They have 1 general training at a time, and then in the past you could train 1 class or archetype at a time. If you're a VIP subscriber, you can train additional 2 archetypes. So I would assume just replace archetype with class, and the system stays the same. I don't foresee a change there. 1 general tree, which basically is what distinguishes you from a crafter, a gatherer, or a combat player. That general tree is the distinction. And then the other 3 are any player can train those simultaneously with those, which is why even a crafter and a gatherer will still have some combat efficiency. The power curve isn't that great that you're a complete gimp out there. So
okay.
It's three trees, the benefits of which you can never gain at the same time, essentially.
Right. Yeah, you can only play 1 character at a time. So it doesn't really matter if you could train 15 trees. It just means you could switch quickly between.
The Templar tree is not helping you with the Ranger tree.
Correct. Right. Yeah, there's no overlap there. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, and that was just something that, popped into my head as I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, well, they had all these VIP rewards and stuff like that, and I'm like, how is this going to be affected with these changes? Because obviously a lot of it was tied to archetypes, and that's being completely,
It would be interesting if they introduced race-based skill trees, encouraging players to focus on playing only a Guanetian or an Elkin. That would be kind of cool and kind of unique and further differentiate players from each other.
Well, what if they taught? Well, again, and this is tin hat theory here. What if they tied like those special lore ability, or not lore abilities, but racial abilities like the burrow and things like that into a racial tree? That
right, yeah.
If when you roll a Ganetian, you can't burrow unless you spend time learning to be a Ganetian, essentially.
I mean, there's a lot of
to that role.
There's a lot of routes they could go with the skill trees. The skill system itself kind of needs an overhaul. There's a lot of criticism floating around in the community in that aspect. I find myself, I like the fact that it allows you to only be one thing at a time, because I really feel that that's what the community is going to be based on. That's where a lot of Star Wars Galaxies players fondly remember. Everyone had a role, and it allowed people to be known as someone who did X. And so you knew that person based on what they did.
I think that's really important if you want to have a strong community in your game.
And I think we talked about this on the side a few times. Sorry, but that was
probably
that was probably one of the biggest deciding factors for me to back this game. Was they very quickly established a lot of design ideas that lended itself to building a solid community. Having players work towards one role and be known for that role is one of those pillars, I think, for them having a successful community. It's not just lip service like you see as bullet points and marketing materials for some of these MMORPGs where they say, we're really interested in our community, but they don't really show it in the design itself. So I think Crowfall is doing the exact opposite of that and actually putting features in place that lend itself to that.
Disciplines was the next
Let me,
big... Okay.
Before we do that, even though we've delved into skills now, which very much lead into disciplines, actually, I'm kind of glad we laid a lot of groundwork before we went into it. That's going to be helpful.
Yeah.
Let me ask one fluff question. What my hard-hitting Good Morning America style question here, but I thought it'd be fun. So with the new race class combinations, what's everybody playing? Scree.
Human Templar, because that's what
Yeah.
I always play. I'm not exciting.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm the serial paladin player, so Templar is pretty much probably it. Probably human, but I gotta say the murder deers are pretty fucking awesome. So
That's my go-to.
there's a strong chance of murder deer Templar.
Yeah.
you're-
The Elkin Ranger was always something I was going to play. Well, the
Elkin
Elkin
Ranger.
Stalker. So that an Elkin Ranger will be in my future.
Nice.
I'll probably play around with, depending on if like the Fae and Guanetian racials allow you to stealth. I'd probably play around with Frostweaver. That sounds pretty cool. And definitely the Assassin, just because the whole stealth guild thing. So.
I could potentially play a ranger. It's definitely something I've considered, but right now, I think the way they have melee built into it is really prohibitively limiting for somebody that doesn't want to feel quite as constrained by bow and arrow ammunition like I do. I'm not opposed to that being in the game. It's just not something I personally want to deal with, so I'm leaning away from them. If there was a way to build a ranger at some point down the line before launch where, if you specialized into it, you could see your melee bar as more primary bar, and then your arrow one is a utility bar you switch to just when you want to use arrows, and your power balance shifted accordingly.
So
I would be
actually
a lot more inclined to look at it.
So that's actually brings up a really cool point, because in the game right now, in the test today, there was a discipline. It's a major discipline, but it changes the druid class. And what it does is the druid has two bars. It has a life bar, which is a healing bar, and it has a electricity storm casting bar. And this discipline, it drops that healing bar altogether, and you become literally a focused DPS.
A murder druid.
Yeah.
Murder
so
druid.
That's
that
not too
technology
different, right?
is in there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, if there's some sort of, I don't know, brawler, a brawler type discipline for the ranger at some point where I wouldn't want to lose the range, but I would take to not have resources. The way it works, as I understand it right now, I should probably actually say this, is that you have essentially an energy bar for your melee bar that only regens when you're in the bow stance. Is that correct?
yeah, but it's all going to get wiped here, because they're going to basically redo the ranger.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
not
I'm
even
just
worth
saying,
looking at.
Right,
yeah,
right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
If in the wipe or a future discipline at some point I could get away from that to, even reverse it, where you can only use range after you've been in melee for so long, or actually that'd probably be the perfect way to do it. I mean, I would take a ranged penalty damage hit if that's what they wanted to do. Something where I could see the ranged weapon as the backup weapon and then not feel totally screwed if I run out of arrows.
yeah.
Then that would get me into it. I'm not saying that's necessarily the best design decision either. I'm just talking personal preference here, because I don't really have a problem with it working the way it does. I just saying I don't want to deal with it. I'll play a Templar.
It is kind of a neat aspect to the game, though, is that so many of these archetypes that they did make had dual aspects to them. Mm-hmm. And these disciplines allow them to remove one of the aspects and make the other one more powerful. And I think that was always intended, potentially with their promotion system. And the disciplines just were the next step in development. They want to make them cool. Mm-hmm. And that they took those promotion ideas and dropped them into disciplines. So I definitely see that being a potential. And even if it's not at launch, the tech's in the game. They could add that at any time. Adding a discipline could probably be a week's worth of work for one guy. It's really an expandable system for them.
Right.
Well, that seems like the perfect seg into what are disciplines.
What are disciplines?
Let's lay some groundwork there, because I don't think a lot of our listeners are going to know, to be honest. And I think it's really cool. I know you're going to want to draw some Shadowbane comparisons, Aggelos, and then we can talk about some of the specifics and thoughts on what we've seen, I guess. So let's let Scree tell us what disciplines are.
There you go. We're putting you to work, buddy.
It's fine. I like talking. I like talking about the game, if you can't tell. So disciplines in the system are Crowfall's way of giving you a choice of how you want to play your character. So it's very different from a World of Warcraft where you pick a rogue and everyone has the same power set. And yeah, there's a little bit of modifiers with their talent trees, but in general, the abilities all stay the same. With disciplines, they literally add new powers to your wheelhouse that, with all the different combinations that are out there, I think we calculated when they tweeted out this reveal, they had a formula out there of how many potential combinations there were with this system now, with the race class split. And doing the math, it was over 45 billion different combinations between all the race classes, all the disciplines, and that is just a testament to how creative players are going to be able to be with these disciplines, which basically what they do is they introduce new passives. They could add or subtract stats to your character. So, you might be better at looking for stealth people, but you're stupid. I don't know why. There's all sorts of offsets and trade-offs that they could implement with this type of system. But the cool part about it is the powers, where you get to basically add a brand new ability to your 1 through 10 action bar and have a power that that your archetype would not have normally come with. And you can literally remap your whole skill your action bar to include nothing that came with the base archetype. You could have all discipline based powers if you wanted. So a lot of cool customization aspects to the system, and basically they're items that you equip. So you can add new ones. You can't take them out once they're in place. They're fixed until you die or your vessel degrades. But basically they're there until you decide to change them out. So pretty cool system though.
Yeah. When I see the runestones, it's funny because this is almost like a direct comparison to Shadowbane, because they also had runestones. They were even called runestones. You could apply like 3 major ones to your character. I don't remember if they had minor. Now again, this was like, I don't know, 8 years ago or longer. It might have even been 10 years ago. I can't even remember how far back this was. I think I still have the box somewhere. I should probably pull it out because I think that'd be funny. But yeah, they had runestones. Like, so you would have your class, but you would fundamentally change your class by what runestones you wanted to be. They had, just for instance, Blade Master, which actually opened up a whole new skill line for you and actually made you, like a Sword Master. Like, you could use swords, but it was different. You got a whole new action set when you became a Blade Master, and anyone could pick them. Most of these runestones were applicable to anybody. Like, there were a few that, I was trying to remember one of them. I think it was like the Sunwalker or something like that, that was tied specifically to one race only. These sun elves of some kind. It was tied to them. You couldn't do anything else. But this, like, as soon as I saw these rune systems, it screamed Shadowbane to me, like 100%. The thing was with that game, because the characters were more persistent, like the vessels, like you said, they die, they degrade, and they go away, and you have to rebuild them again. This game, they were tied to PvE events, like monsters and stuff that would be rare spawns. You'd kill them, and then you'd get the runestone, and you could swap them out at will as long as you had the runestone. You couldn't. It would destroy the one that was in there. But you could just plop them around. So, like, if I were a Blade Master and later on I go, I don't really want to be a Blade Master, I want to be a X, but I have no more rune slots, okay, I'm getting rid of Blade Master. You just plop it on there and it killed the runestones. And you could just keep going with that character. But again, the characters were more persistent. You created one character. You weren't a crow inhabiting a vessel. You were just that character. But
sure.
the system itself is 100%, more refined now that 10 years went by. But it's Shadowbane.
It is, and it's a very duplicative system from that Shadowbane model. Yeah. There's a lot of similarities to it. They just factored a 4, increased the magnitude and scope of it, and what the actual implications were to the individual character. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I mean, there's only benefits to the system. And honestly, for players who like the theorycraft and metas and PvP environments, is more applicable to something like Guild Wars 2, where there were popular builds and stuff of that nature. This system is just so much more expansive that's going to be a huge element to this game, especially as they add new ones. The meta will always be constantly evolving. And so there's a lot of interesting ramifications to a system where there's right now 113 disciplines from the reveal, with another probably 100 coming. We saw a lot of the combat ones, but they haven't introduced any of the gathering or crafting based disciplines, which are definitely coming, so you can differentiate your character that way. And probably even more in terms of combat disciplines are yet to come. One of my favorite memories of Shadowbane was the Thief. And early on, they talked about, well, we can't make a Thief class, but we might be able to do a Thief discipline. And you could drag and drop that into any of the 3, potential stealth classes. So that could be a cool way to expand the game in a huge way without necessarily needing to add a whole new class to the game. And I think that's really the novelty of the system, is it gives them so much expansion capability without actually needing to do the work of, what a World of Warcraft would have to do, modeling hundreds of different pieces of armor for a new class and animations for everything. It's a much more robust system for them adding new features and capabilities to the toolbox.
And it'll be really good to see if they actually do that, because I'm just thinking about the Elder Scrolls Online right now, which has this theoretically extremely expandable system where they have all these skill lines that are shared in between classes. And now, next Monday, when the patch comes for the Morrowind expansion early access, they're going to be breaking new ground as the first MMO to release an expansion, adding nothing for existing classes and taking away from them.
Well, here's the hoping. Their promises that they've made in this game are very, very in-depth. And so far, they've managed to live up to a good deal of my expectations for what I was looking for in this game. Sure, there's some snags, but it's still technically the pre-alpha. But yeah, I mean, whether or not they introduce new stuff later on, that was the promise of the archetype system. So that has me a little nervous. Are they going to be able to add new races or add new classes into the game anymore, after this reveal? That's the question. And who knows? That's going to be the difficult part. They might not ever add new classes and races anymore, and they'll stick solely to the discipline area to do that. So it is interesting to think about that, actually, because before archetypes, kind of made sense. It was, again, MOBA-esque, especially if you're talking about adding more, easily as the game goes on. Now they've opened up a lot of this where, we're seeing more skills moved to, the races, to the disciplines probably, with weapons getting their own disciplines as well, and more classes having access to more weapons. I don't know. It almost... They're not. I understand that they're the most impactful thing about your character. Don't get me wrong, but classes, almost in a way, feel a little bit superfluous. To where I'm almost thinking, why not just go with a skill-based system where people can build their own class? Of course, I see every MMO and think that. So, it is an interesting thought, because you really wonder why even like I was mentioning when we were talking about disciplines, you could replace every power with discipline powers, so that in fact, there almost is no base class, at least from a power standpoint on your ability bar. But there are some inherent traits to that base class. Your resource generation, a lot of the left click, right click, and their ultimate powers. Those are all slotted based on your base class, and some of those can't go away. You need power resource builders, pips, like in the traditional rogue model in World of Warcraft, mana, energy, rage. All of those systems are pretty much tied to the class. It'd be really hard to replace that type of a resource system with just a skill-based system. So I think that's why they're holding on to that. And there are some great powers in the base classes. So it's not like all those powers need to be discarded, but you certainly have the ability to do so should you choose. And we see that a really good example, and something that was kind of a surprise to a lot of us. They added Bard song powers in this reveal. So there's actually 2 different powers that relate to it. There's a Bard discipline and a Troubadour discipline. One's offensive, one's defensive.
That was actually going to be one of the things I wanted to talk about.
So what you see with these two, and then there's minor disciplines to support it even more, is you could literally pick any class and replace all of the powers and become a bard. And so instead of making a whole new class, they just kind of snuck it in with disciplines, which is kind of cool, and it bodes well for the mixing and matching that can go on in the future. You could have a stealth bard, you could have a minotaur that sings songs. Who knows? I mean, there's so many different combinations and variations out there. It's kind of cool to see that, but they actually did it in this patch, so it shows they could technically sneak in classes without needing to add an extra class to the game.
Right. No, I definitely like this. Now, right now they were saying how many disciplines they can take. I see that like you can add. They say 1 weapon, 2 major disciplines, 3 major or minor disciplines. Are you forced into taking those? Like
no.
But are the slots like? And that's something that I'm specific about. Like if I don't really want a weapon specialization, do I have to take one, or can I replace it with something else?
It is only slotted for weapon disciplines.
Okay.
So you couldn't replace it with anything else.
Yeah. But
you're not forced to take a weapon discipline. You can leave it empty.
Right. And no, that's just a question that I had. Because I'm like, But yeah. All right. So we have the discipline. Anyone have anything else they want to talk about disciplines? I mean, we kind of went into pretty much in depth there. No. Okay.
Yeah, my main thing was that I was excited to see bards.
The bards. Everyone loves bards.
Another thing I find exciting that I probably won't play.
That was what I was working on while we were waiting.
It is interesting seeing some of the how group focused some of them are as well. A lot of these are buffing toolkits, like the standard bearer kind of jumps out that way. You can see it was
Escape Artist is another good one.
Yeah, Escape Artist. There was Juggernaut is an anti-CC one as well. Mole Hunter to catch Guinness and burrow effectively.
Yeah,
I'll probably take that out of spite.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of interesting utility they have. I think this is pretty awesome addition. It's nice to finally sort of see them.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, there's been. I can't even tell you. There's a lot of community members who I regularly chat with, and this is the most anticipated system in this game, just because this is where all the PvP builds will basically be born from. So to actually see this system means the theory crafting really can begin. Mm-hmm. What we've done up to this point has all been a preamble to seeing these systems finally come online. So it's really exciting. Probably the most exciting part of this release, more so than the race class unlock, to be honest, at least for me.
Right. Someone in chat actually means he's in chat. Correct me if I'm wrong. These disciplines only give you access to 1 to 3 active skills, though. So you still end up using base class skills no matter what. I thought is that true?
Well, you can actually get 2 disciplines, 2 major disciplines. So in theory, they're not limiting it to that, but that's what we've seen is 3 powers, 1 passive. Mm-hmm. But that's just that could just be a template for them. That doesn't mean that's what they're going to hold themselves to in the future. There's also powers tied to the weapon disciplines. So 6 powers with the 2 mains with their current models, 2 powers with the weapon discipline, and right there that's 8. So your bar's pretty much full there. You've got your left and right click powers and stuff like that, but I mean you've basically filled up a whole bar without the class powers, and really that left click is your resource generator.
Right.
So you can't go without that, or you wouldn't be able to use any of the discipline powers because they all use whatever resource your base class is. That's actually one of the cool aspects too, is all the disciplines convert to consuming the resource of your base class. So if your base class uses pips, the discipline powers use pips. If your base class uses rage, your discipline powers use rage. Even if they're the same discipline, between those 2 types of resource generations. It just kind of converts automatically to that. So it's essentially you have that base power to generate those resources in the first place, or you wouldn't be able to do anything basically in the game. So
right. So the final thing that was released, and this one is actually pretty big, the graphics overhaul. They pretty much did an entire nuts overhaul for the graphic fidelity of the game. And they said pretty
it
much...
It wasn't the only thing that was very big.
I don't even know where to take that. So I'm gonna post a few pictures here in the chat room for people of some of the screenshots from the official announcement. So some of you may have already seen it, others maybe not. But it's definitely interesting to see this one because these images are like it's pretty. It's pretty compared to where it was. Like it's a big step forward. And
I did a YouTube video actually just a couple days ago where I was running around in one of the last betas, and I talked a little bit about the art style. And I was like, I like it. You could tell certain parts of it, especially like the lighting, are really placeholder. And then like a week later, they went and overhauled it, and it looks so good.
Yeah. So they pretty much said for the last 2 months that they've been working with a lot of Unity's engineers to actually work on their client performance and the graphics fidelity of this entire thing, as well as some optimization. And they also incorporated a new lighting system, which, as you said, it was placeholder, and now it's, they've got them God rays, which look pretty awesome. So, and going back and re-adding some higher grade textures to all their world assets. Now, before the live stream for this show began, Scree, you were kind of just streaming to kind of show us from the latest update, and it looked like it was running pretty smooth still.
Yeah, and I have an Intel Core i5 1070. I'm not running a top-of-the-line system here, but I had that thing on very high. It was running smooth. Now, what wasn't smooth 100% was some of the rubber banding that was going on. There were some people murdering people near me while I was streaming. There's still a little bit of aspects of that. But in general, the actual graphics engine is light years ahead of what it was.
And it didn't seem to be running... This is a bit of a backhanded compliment, but it didn't seem to be running any worse than it was before the graphics flaw. Right?
But that's actually...
But it looked way better.
From my perspective, Crowfall's graphics needed to be good enough to not get in its way. Because a lot of people make snap judgments about a game and its gameplay based on how it looks. Mm-hmm. And I do it myself. They have, I think, at least exceeded that threshold where people are going to look at the game and just immediately discount it because of how it looks. I think they've achieved that.
I actually really, really like the art style that they've decided to go with. The way I've always complimented is they went with something that people probably disagree with me when I say this, but it's almost as cartoony, not quite, as a game like WildStar or WoW, only they've given it this gritty color palette that lets me take it seriously. So it can run like a dream with that cartooniness.
I think the politically correct term is stylized.
But it doesn't look, I don't know, obnoxious.
It doesn't. However, my concern is the way it looks right now is with this fall/spring motif. Mm-hmm. But we know that there's supposed to be seasonal changes in the game. Mm-hmm. I'm very nervous how this game looks when there's snow everywhere. Because when you load up this login screen, what you're hit with is a blinding white background with really cool stylized characters in the front, and it looks awesome. Me personally, but everyone in chat was complaining about being blinded.
The Avengers, where everybody's spitting. Yeah, actually, that's a really good point. I hope it gets darker. I mean, because it's supposed to be.
That would be the nice offset because winter is supposed to be the end of a world. They just darken the lighting, and then it's not blinding out there anymore. So that would be a cool way to do it.
A permanent.
That's my concern. Yeah,
that's a really good concern. I mean, you're right. The load screen is a little. I did it before I knew where you were going with it.
And I'm just trying to picture a world covered in this kind of blinding snow, which, again, that's a future problem because we don't have snow yet. But otherwise, I think the game looks amazing. And some of the videos they showed of sieges.
Yeah, I love those two pictures. I liked the green fog with the undead that they were fighting in.
Yeah.
Yeah, that looked really good to me.
I mean, honestly, the sieges are probably the epitome of this game. That's why they're making it so people fight other people at cities, siege warfare. And the video showing that, if they can pull that off with actual players controlling that's the game right there. They've got it. I mean, that the success is guaranteed at that point, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, we've seen a lot of really garbage RVR MMOs. There's so many different ways you can kind of go wrong.
That's
And,
true. I shouldn't say. You're right. I'll
yeah.
backstep it. I think knowing what I know about Crowfall and the systems, if they can pull off the actual execution of those sieges, I think they've got a hit.
I think the crafting system alone, and I say this as something, I talk Star Wars Galaxies and its crafting system all the time. I was not a crafter in that game. It's just the complexity of it, the importance it placed on crafters, the way they were able to differentiate themselves and stand out, created a believable virtual world that I really enjoyed being a part of, even as a non-crafter. So, looking at Crowfall's crafting systems, that alone, even as somebody that's definitely not going to be a crafter, is kind of the big thing that made me go, whoa, this could be the real deal this time.
Yeah.
But I will say, for sieges, I hope they don't neglect audio. A lot of games sometimes, don't go into it that well, and when I'm playing, like, Guild Wars 2 versus the Elder Scrolls Online, it just feels so bad. Because ESO, their RVR mode is terrible, and I think they've given up on just making it run.
I mean, who is really going to play that game for the RVR in the first place?
We all thought that was how it was sold to us in pre-launch before they ruined it. Like, I mean, in the first couple of betas or alphas, Aggelos can tell you if you logged in for those. They were incredible, but then they made like a million billion changes. Forward camps, AoE caps, adding vampire builds into the game, not being able to at all. That just made it like a complete joke, and then they added new systems post-launch where they just can't even get it to run. So it's terrible now. But one of the things they did great was the audio work. When a trebuchet fires in ESO, it is one of the coolest sounding things I've heard in a game outside of any second in Elite Dangerous, which is amazing. But every other game, it kind of just blows away. It's super immersive, and it sounds awesome, and you feel like you're in the battle. And I know, are those kinds of aesthetic things the most important part? No. But, just since we're talking about graphics and thinking that they look really good so far, don't forget the sound.
Yeah, and I know one of their Kickstarter stretch goals, I think, was an audio engineer. So I think they have that. So
yeah, hopefully. They do. That was one of their earliest stretch goals. Mean Season in chat, I wanted to address this because this is graphics. He's saying, if they increase all the graphics, will large-scale sieges work? Right now, it's poorly optimized. I can't imagine it's going to get any better with a huge graphical revamp. There's a lot of misconception with how that works, okay? Graphics on your end, like, the way a server handles the input and the way your computer handles the graphical fidelity is different. Because let's be honest here. Like you said, it's poorly optimized. All of us on the show have played Crowfall when it was not before the graphical update, and it still had issues. That is not the graphical, that is the net code, the way that the client and the server actually talk to one another, that determine the how well the game responds. Now, your computer can still stutter a little bit if your hardware cannot render the graphics, but
turn off lighting, turn off shadows, turn off reflections. Like, everything they just added won't affect you.
Yeah, but having high-end graphics it will not affect if they have poor netcode. They could have what they had before.
ESO, just to continue shitting on that game, everything I was talking about that kind of ruined it, it had nothing to do with the graphics, which were sometimes good, but it had a lot more to do with the things that really made it go to shit were when they added systems like the champion system that was essentially post-level cap progression. If you think about the Paragon system in Diablo, where after level cap you can put points into all types of different passive benefits, that made it so that the servers were making like 400 times as many calculations per second every time players were in combat. Those are the things that really make your RVR games run like ass. That's almost always the problem in not graphical settings that the users can tweak on their own ends.
Yeah, because the server side's not seeing the graphics. It's seeing a code saying, you're here on a grid map, and it's going, okay, I ping you, you're here. Okay, I'm going to ping you again to make sure you're still here. And, oh, you fired off an ability. Let me do a calculation. Okay, it hit these people. Let me do that calculation. It's that interface that is what causes your optimization, not the graphics.
On that note, this is definitely a Scree question. One of the things Crowfall was trying to do early on, and they might still be doing, is a big emphasis on having real physics in the combat. And that's, one of the holy mother of blowing up your server types of situations. They've walked that back a little bit, as I understand it, haven't they?
Yeah, I don't see a lot of the newer archetypes. Don't have a lot of those knock up, knock back type powers. They're still in the game though, so it's still there. And that's going to be a perpetual presence in the game because they want players to be able to run into each other and have physical, you're not stacking on the same person like a Guild Wars 2 Zerg ball.
That's actually a little bit less what I was talking about, by the way. I'm totally down with collision, and I don't think that's the end of the world.
It's essential. It's essential.
I was thinking more like the way, I really loved collision in Warhammer. I thought it added a lot to the game. Projectiles. Haven't they changed the way projectiles travel? And are targeted?
They moved them from because basically the original design was a slower combat system where when you executed a power, your character couldn't move. It was locked in place as the animation completed. So this locked in fixed animation. I don't even remember the terminology anymore. They've gotten rid of it.
Animation locking.
So
universally hated almost.
It was, and it was absolutely horrible. I mean, thankfully they abandoned that.
So bad.
I mean, even the most praise it got was bear tolerance. That's basically the level of hatred that was out there for this. That's gone, and because of that, since players can now move around faster, they've moved those pixel accuracy, range shots into ray casts, so that you can catch people at longer distances and not have to be pinpoint accurate. With that physics engine.
So a ray cast, it's still tracking the movement of the item, but it's along kind of it's not the actual item, it's a
cone. Yeah, think of it as a cone shooting out from the character. Yeah, that's basically what they change it to, as opposed to just a line coming out where you had to literally be on them.
But it's not like a soft targeting system. It's still
it is not.
Skill shot.
It is still a skill shot. Yeah. It's just they've made the skill shot slightly easier.
It's just you're not hitting a hitbox in 3-dimensional space anymore.
Correct.
Yeah,
but they still do per each limb has its own hitbox. So your head has a hitbox, your arms have hitboxes, your legs have hitboxes, and where you hit, they use that armor piece that you're wearing to determine your resistances. So if you have no armor on your head and you get hit in the head, you have no resistances. So
but with the soft lock, how are they calculating that? Is it RNG? Because
there's no soft lock. It's skill shots.
Yeah. So as I understand it, instead of tracking the actual shape of a fireball, they're tracking a big ass moving square.
I don't even think they do that. It's template. It's template type. So what they're doing is with the cone, the difference between projectile physics, which caused a lot of crap. Because when you're shooting a projectile, so I'm going to pull up here for the camera. You got your projectile. You fire your projectile. Every piece it's moving, it's pinging back to the server going, I am now here. I have not hit a target.
Go up on everybody's computer in the area at the same time is a nightmare.
Yeah, so every tip, it's like, I have not hit an object. I have not hit an object. Because if you're aiming at Isarii and all of a sudden Scree runs in front of it, in projectile physics, it'll go, I haven't hit anything. I haven't hit anything. I hit Scree, not Isarii. In the soft locking, how it's doing, it's using templates where what it's going to do is it's going to go, I'm firing in this area. Based on when I hit this skill, I am affecting grids A, B, C, and D. Isarii, at that time, when it pings the server, was in D. He now gets hit.
To my knowledge, it's not doing that.
It's not. It's doing full projectile? Because that's
still doing projectile. They've just widened the projectile lane, supposedly, to make it easier. Now, again, they haven't gotten into the tech side of this with the public. At least not to the point where I've been exposed to it.
Yeah.
But they mentioned specifically changing a lot of the powers to raycasts in the patch notes. So what the implications of that are on the tech side, I'm not qualified to answer.
Right.
Okay. Well, I don't feel as bad for not understanding it when I was reading about it then.
It-
Sounds like they've changed something, and I don't know what it is.
I know they were saying full projectile, but all of us who were in the gray box testing, I'm sure you guys know, it ran like garbage. And that's when they started changing, going
garbage.
It was bad. It was unplayable. And it was to the point, that's when they started going, okay, we're switching to this raycast and moving away from the pure projectile physics, because they're realizing, okay, our server code can't handle this. You know what I mean? That's why I'm saying I don't think the raycast works quite that way. And again, without seeing how the tech's actually applying, based on how, like going off WildStar with the cone didn't calculate in that. It just, when it calculates, like anything within this grid gets hit. And when it pings the server, anything standing within that grid got hit. It's not so much a skill shot, because with the skill shot, obviously that's where you start seeing the projectile physics with the insane ping. And that's why most of the first person shooters and stuff that have the no soft locking, which is essentially the same thing as I just mentioned, it's not tracking projectiles. No random bird's going to fly in the middle of your arrow and intercept it, because when you hit the button, it goes, okay, you're here. It's going to hit right there in this time. It's a code in there. There we go. And if the player is standing in that spot, the calculation is there. There's no random, a player ran in front of my gun at this time and now got hit, because that does not exist.
I am inclined to take Scree at his word that they are doing some sort of projectile tracking that's just been simplified. Because when you think about it, even Guild Wars 2, for some reason, even though it's tab targeted, is doing like an actual projectile calculation that can be intercepted at any point and anything like that. We've definitely seen it work even by older games.
Right. Well,
that are doing RVR.
I think what we perceive as projectile and what isn't is not there.
It could be creative coding, for all we know.
Yeah.
But again, I'm going to feign ignorance on this topic. I know the language they've used with us, and so that's what I'm going by. But It's the actual engineering of their system now. I have not heard of a major shift from projectile targeting to soft targeting. I haven't heard that.
Right.
So they still keep citing skill targeting.
Yeah, I would love to get one of their engineers on here to kind of explain that. So Crowfall, if you have an engineer who's willing to explain how your raycast works and maybe enlighten, that would be wonderful. But I know how projectile physics work, and in MMOs, it's very hard to do, just because, like, even with ESO, the amount of calls that a single projectile makes to the server is astronomical. It's just a lot. So then it goes up exponentially when you add more and more people. That's why these large sieges run like crap, because now it's calculating from all these different people, and not only just calculating once when you make the hit the skill button, it's now calculating every step of the way as the projectile's moving. So instead of one calculation, it's now 300 calculations multiplied by the amount of times you're doing the skill and the amount of people doing all the skills around you. It's a lot of calculations. So, wow, that was off topic. Not really, but maybe we got a little bit more into that than what I expected. GMA.
This is almost as bad as when we let you talk about lore.
I know. I have things that I like to talk about. But yeah, as I said, some skills are projectiles, but many skills have been changed to raycast. So yeah, maybe there are some things that are still calculated by projectile. Maybe something like siege engines, trebuchets are still projectile, because if they cap the number of trebuchets you can have, it's not 5,000 characters making an action, it's 50 running the trebuchets, right?
That would make sense as to why I haven't noticed it, because the way that, let's say, the Confessor's just basic fireball attack works is very it just feels like a projectile still, where it's clearly not soft locking onto anything.
I guess, yeah. I'd have to look closer at it when I see it, because it's just one of those things where it's not like I see a projectile whiz by a person and go, hey, there we are. It looks like we might have lost Scree or something. Yeah, it looks like we did, which is fine. But yeah.
Yeah, he just told me he's been having some power issues tonight. His power went out right when we started the test call before you even got on it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so he just told me it went out and that he's probably out for the night.
That's fine.
I think we were reaching the end anyway.
Yeah, we are at the end. So
yeah.
Even though our cameras are screwed at this end, I'm just
good timing, Scree's power.
Yeah. I'm just gonna go ahead and just turn off the cameras right now because we have no need for them. All right. And I gotta get rid of my cat because she won't leave me alone. Go away. This entire show, I'm telling you. All right. Well, this was episode 9 of the Dungeon Crawls. I want to thank my co-host, Isarii. Isarii, what are your final thoughts there, man?
Yeah, I think these are good changes. I am generally in favor of the more RPG sort of complexity, the more character the more character freedom you can get in MMO, the better. Seeing classes and races unlock, fantastic. Seeing disciplines for the first time, they're not really new. Exciting. I really like the direction they're going there. It's kind of what we already knew, but sort of seeing things like, oh, you can make a bard, both offensive and defensive at the same time, is very, very exciting. And then the new lighting engine. I think I call that our personal Lord and Savior on Twitter. It looks fantastic. Yeah. So now I just have to go figure out, am I going to play a human Templar or a murder deer Templar?
Murder deer.
Have you seen the concept of the murder deer Templar?
I have.
Oh, so cool.
It is pretty neat. Thank goodness I asked Scree where all of his stuff was at the beginning of the show. So if you want to know where to find Scree, just rewind to the very beginning of the episode, listen to it, and then listen to the whole episode again.
Okay, I can shout out Scree a little bit. He is on Twitter at the Scree, TheScree, and then also stealthed.blog.
There you go.
Yep.
So thank you, Scree, for coming in and being our
stealth tactics site.
Stealth tactics.
I think is probably how he tagged that. I don't know. He talks about a lot of Crowfall stuff, and it's worth checking out.
Absolutely.
Onrez, our previous guest, I believe, contributes there as well. So they've got a good group.
Yep, definitely. So thank you, Scree, for being our expert on the field for Crowfall. Thank you, Isarii, for coming on. Obviously, check out all of our stuff, DungeonCrawlerNetwork.com. We do this show, which is a general MMO podcast, as well as several other shows related to other MMORPGs, including Final Fantasy XIV, The Elder Scrolls Online, and Ashes of Creation, and Saga of Lucemia. So check all that stuff out over at our website, youtube.com/DungeonCrawlerNetwork. You find us everywhere under that particular name. Thank you so much. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you next time.